right, buddy, we want you to sit down for a little bit. What? But now I'm calling Joe phone crazy.
For the whole day.
And Joe said, just come to Patreon, I'm gonna pay you fully. I'm gonna go ahead and you. Listen, I just want to shout out to y'all. I just want to say this, man. Like,
I was in Baltimore. Ian told me to come into Patreon. I called Jones like, why am I coming to Patreon? And Joe said, just come to Patreon. I'm going to pay you fully. I ended up coming into Patreon late, like an hour and a half late. So me and Joe were behind. You know, why I came in was going back and forth. If you looked at the camera when he was sitting over there, you would see that he was looking. I was standing there the whole time. So, you know, I sat down just being aggravated. Joe Budden removes Flip from the main podcast and tells him to come to the Patreon only. But then Flip would arrive almost an hour late. Now, this is significant because we are seeing QueenzFlip get demoted in real time. Everyone knows that the main episode is actually the calling card of the Joe Budden podcast. While the Patreon is important, the main episode is the advertisement. And with many people focused on the beef between Mark Lamont Hill and Flip, we lost a lot of what was actually going on. And that is that Flip and Joe Budden's relationship is on the rocks because Flip would go on Spaces and reveal the actual drama, saying that Ian told him to not come to the main pod. That's right, Ian Schwartzman would call Flip and say, hey buddy, we don't need you in the main pod, just come for the Patreon. But like Flip tends to do, he would call Joe Budden directly upon hearing this, therefore crossing the line and disregarding the organizational structure of the Joe Budden network. Remember, he has been warned multiple times about this. Remember when he got suspended, and I believe it was the summer 2024, when he threatened Joe to a fight by Ian. He would go on to call Joe Budden and even show up at his house.
All right, buddy, we want you to sit down for a little bit. What? But now I'm calling Joe phone crazy. Calling his phone back to mad times. Then I said, yo, I'm pulling up.
Then there was that time that of the TMZ article when he would try to interview with TMZ and Ian would tell him what to do. Instead, he would try to call Joe Budden.
No, wait, text him about TMZ?
No, I called you.
What did you say to me?
I said, TMZ reached out, you told me not to. I said, tell me, I want to troll them. Tell me what to say. You sent me a text back and said, do not meet them. It's not a good idea with what's going on here.
You called me.
And I still went.
Why?
Because he do what he wants.
Because what I say is not.
So this is a pattern of behavior, and Flip is basically digging his own grave. Now, Flip would also reveal that when he called Joe Budden and told him that he didn't like that he couldn't come to the main pod, Joe said that he would pay him for the whole day.
For the whole day.
and Joe said, just come to Patreon, I'm gonna pay you fully.
That's fascinating. Now, people usually get paid for the episodes they attend, so it would make sense that they would be grumbling about being overworked, but still showing up for all the pods if you had to presume that someone is paid for the entire day. That money is what they desire. So, if you attend episodes, you get compensated. You don't get paid right away. Now, I'm aware that some will respond, Danny, that's the case, of course. If that's the case, though, why is Flip getting preferential treatment and being compensated for 2 episodes, even though he only appears in 1? Melissa Ford may have been correct about how they handle Flip up there. Next, Flip arrives at the pavilion an entire hour and a half late. Flip stated that he was instructed to remain behind the scenes when he first arrived at the podcast, most likely due to his tardiness. However, he would cause such discomfort that they would allow him to be on the show, and the rest is history in terms of Mark Lamont Hill and Flip fighting. That should explain the seating arrangement, am I correct? Initially, J1 occupied Park's chair, after which Joe Budden took his place. It provides a lot of explanation. Additionally, the episode in which Flip and Mark Lamont Hill argued is highly consequential because, as others have noted, Flip joined the mic after Mark Lamont Hill was on it, upending the entire structure because he was himself an hour and a half late despite missing the main pod. The last stages of QueenzFlip's Joe Budden podcast era are currently underway, one in which his acts will now have clear and limited repercussions. For Flip, the days of comprehension appear to be coming to an end. Remember how Joe Budden used to say, I understand. He is vivacious. Flip is exactly like this. This is what happens when you agree to bring Flip on a show. However, he is currently being instructed not to attend the Friday main pod. Furthermore, he showed even more disrespect for the Joe Budden network by arriving an hour and a half late, even though he had not arrived at the main pod. It's absurd that you would tell me that you somehow managed to arrive late. It's insane. Flip has to get serious, get to work, and get started if he wants to continue on the show, because if he pulls another prank, it's over. Flip would also show up on MySpaces. Indeed, it's correct. He has been battling with me, cussing me, and having issues with the storylines on my video for years. I'll give you a slap. I don't find anything cool about you. I'm not attempting to imitate anything that you've done. I worked hard. regardless of whether you're in the pod. Additionally, I have you for Sue Surf since your previous act is worn out, and when Sue Surf hits the pot, we're finally going somewhere and I'm going to get some views. Suddenly, he chooses to be on my platform and provide his perspective on the Mark Lamont Hill individual.
Listen, I just want to shout out to y'all. I just want to say this, man. Like, sometimes it's just taking a joke or what was said out of context, and that's what I did. And we got to call it for the spade to spade.
Now, many would say that this was an olive branch, a sign that he and I were making amends, but I actually thought it was a sign of how dire things are getting at the Joe Budden Network for Flip. Essentially, my space was a place for Flip to control the narrative. Well, there you have it, guys. Remember, just because Mark Lamont Hill and Flip are arguing doesn't mean we disregard all of the tension that's happening between Joe Budden, Ian, and QueenzFlip. Plus, I couldn't find a space, but Flip did a space where he was talking about what happened, and Ian Schwartzman would join, and he would essentially say a bunch of stuff about, it being a pleasure having you, Flip. Thank you for being here. You did a really great job. And he was talking about Flip in the past tense. Now, some people might be like, yo, it's all content over everything. But these guys, Joe, Flip, Ian, and Mark, they like to leave breadcrumbs. They like to leave some of it feeling real. I mean, Ian and Flip are big WWE fans, and sometimes in those WWE storylines, you actually see what's going on behind the scenes. And I think what that represented from Ian was, all right, it's really over for you unless you shape up. And what you did last Friday, coming late to the Patreon and not even having to show up for the main pod, and you still found a way to be late, just means that you don't give a crap about this show. And to make things worse, you will argue with Mark Lamont Hill. Now, there are many people saying that Mark Lamont Hill was the aggressor. He was one that started this whole thing. Doesn't matter if you don't have any equity. We all know when a special moment in our lives happened and we felt we were right because hell, everything was on our side. But then as a result of the wrong actions we took prior and the trust that we lost, we weren't right. We didn't earn the opportunity to be right. And because of Flip's prior transgressions, whenever he speaks, whenever he issues a grievance at the Joe Budden Network, it falls on deaf ears. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like this is a bigger issue than the Mark Lamont Hill fight? I think the fact that Flip is on the outs with Joe and Ian, it was probably the worst thing to get into argument with Mark, who is now arguably the golden child of Joe Budden Network. Look at E. Manny. He was cool with Mark, so when something went wrong, he was able to patch things over and it didn't look like a really big deal. But now when Flip makes a mistake, it's over, guys. If Flip does something like that again, he's probably going to be demoted to one day a week, which is going to be Wednesdays. And then it's going to get worse. And you're going to see that Flip isn't on the pod by the end of 2025. All right, y'all. That's my video for now. Man, this is getting crazy. We're looking at Melissa Ford gone. We're looking at Flip gone. Mona's probably watching this like, what the hell did I sign up for? These guys are crazy. Then you have J1 who just came back. I know people are like, yo, J1 just came back. He looks energetic. But J1 is wishy-washy. He's a mural. So as easily as he looks happy, I would say in a month or two, he's going to be upset. He's going to feel like he can't talk. He's going to get tired of Mona. And that'll be a whole other situation we have to watch. Then J1's back. They're integrating him into the show. Man, so much tension is happening. But with that said, follow me on Instagram to Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter to Stop TV. Make sure you tap in with my Patreon because that's where I have a lot of the spaces where we deep dive on subjects, and the replays are exclusive to my Patreon. Also, we have podcast episodes that we put there first. So there's a lot of content there. We're really bingeable. And we also have think pieces. I just did a video breaking down Tony the Closer versus Mona, aka Don't Call Me White Girl. All right, y'all. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.